That's it, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you want to do it again?
No. Welcome back to In Residence. I'm Keith.
And I'm Laura.
How you doing today, Laura?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. What are we going to talk about today?
Today, I wanted to talk about a conversation that I had this week with someone, and I thought it was interesting, and I didn't quite know how to respond. And I wanted to ask the same questions I was being asked to you. Are you on the edge of your seat?
Yeah.
Okay. The conversation that I was having was about how did I end up picking which college that I decided to go to. And it's a typical question, right? Of how did, if you went to college, what college and what drew you to it? And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I actually almost didn't go to college. I really wanted to be a travel agent.
Mm-hmm.
And the individual looked at me and was intrigued because I work in higher education. I've been a student or was a student for, I don't even know how many years. What is high school plus college plus graduate school plus PhD graduate school? And so for that to kind of fall out of my mouth was interesting to me, but absolutely 100% true.
Like when you told me though, you said like they kind of caught them off guard a little bit or whatever. Like they definitely noticed. And then you kind of felt like, oh, I maybe said too much, which is kind of funny because it's like, it's just part of your journey or whatever. So
yeah,
I thought it was kind of funny.
Well, and I think the questions, and it was a great conversation, but the questions I was asked is, what drew you to that idea? What changed your mind to not pursue being a travel agent and to attend the institution that you went to? And I thought that was interesting because all of us growing up have had an idea of what it is we want to be when we grow up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know even just at a really young age, I remember when child one was really young, and I believe he was graduating, going from preschool to kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that it? And all of the kids at their graduation ceremony had to stand up and share a picture of what they wanted to be when they grew up. What profession, what job, what thing did they want to be? And he had this picture in front, and I think it was of a firefighter, right? Or a policeman. I can't even remember.
I thought he wanted to be like a snake charmer or something.
Well, that's what he came up and said. So he had a picture of, I think it was a firefighter. And he came up and they said, child one, what would you like to be when you grow up? And he goes, I want to be a snake catcher.
Yeah.
And it just warmed my heart because it was so unique and different and so him, because he's always been fascinated by reptiles. And so with that, I guess what I'm saying, I wanted to ask you, because I know we've talked about what we've wanted to be when we grow up or grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I could answer that question a number of different ways, but I wanted to ask you, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah. And obviously, I think it's obvious. I wanted to be a musician, in the teenage years and stuff. And I often say, I wanted to be a rock star. But that felt more acceptable to say than I want to be a musician. And there was an allure to being possibly like a well-known artist or in a famous band, let's say. But when I actually thought more about like answering that question, like the real thought was, I want to make a living making music. And then that spurred on more thoughts of like, well, that didn't happen.
So what drew you to wanting to be a musician or being a rock star when you were growing up?
So I thought about it, right? I thought about it in preparation for this. And I think it boils down to connection and the way I feel when I hear music that resonates with me, whether it's the sound, the melody, the chords, the lyrics. It's all about, for me, it comes down to how it's evoking emotion or a feeling in me, and I connect with that. It resonates, right? Pun intended. And that's not some big epiphany. I don't think like people gravitate towards what resonates with them. It's just that was like music was the most prominent thing, and there must be something too also of once I got a guitar and I realized I could make sound also. And now I'm thinking like that was happening last night with Child 2 was down here and he grabbed a guitar and I was showing him how to do a couple things just casually, and not like a huge lesson, because it can get a little too daunting to try to like hold this chord shape. It's like, no, just pluck the strings a little bit. So yeah.
That was fun to see. You had a little Metallica duet going.
Yeah.
What was the song that you were teaching?
I taught him the first like 4 notes of Nothing Else Matters, like just the little rolling, just the rolling like dun, 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 dun. And he got it really quick. It was really, I was blown away. And so then I could kind of play like the little melody part over it a little bit, but he was doing it so well. He started going fast. I'm like, you're going too fast. You're going too slow down. Like, I can't play that fast. I'm screwing up, which is funny because that lesson that I talked about before of like, go slow so you do it right, kind of thing. Anyway, yeah. So that's what the connection and making, like, in hindsight, I see that, but in the moment, it's just what lit me up and like what was just attractive to me or just turned me on, pontificating about it now might sound like I didn't have a lot of these thoughts back then. It was more of like, I'm doing this because I like it and the way I feel when I do it. So anyway, I'm rambling. What about you? Like, because I can see why people would be like, wait, what? You wanted to be a travel agent? Like, what?
I know. And I absolutely, that was what I can't remember, but it was in high school and I was trying to decide between going to college and not going to college. And I thought if I could be a travel agent, I would do what it is that I loved. I loved traveling, seeing new places, going on adventures. I thought that fiscally it made a lot of sense because somebody else would pay for me to do those things, and that I would be able to really explore the world and all it has to offer, meet new people, learn new things, and be able to really do what I was passionate about as part of my career. Because I wasn't quite sure what it was I wanted to do in college. I always had goals, but I wasn't quite sure if what I was going to go to school for actually was something that I was passionate about. And so, I mean, maybe that speaks to some of my shifting journey in my undergraduate years, coming in as a chemistry major, leaving as a music performance major. I think it all boiled down to, I know you said connection. I think for me, it did boil down to connection, adventure, and learning.
So it's interesting that looking back now, I kind of had a similar experience. Like, I almost didn't go to college too.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about getting like an accounting certificate or something and just being an accountant during the day so that I could play music at night. Like, that was my smart, bright plan, right?
You're being practical.
Yeah, I was being practical. Well, okay, and so that leads me to another thing of like, okay, obviously I'm not making a living being a musician. That never came to fruition. And I think a lot of the reason is I was too practical. And so thinking about, what did I want to be? Why am I not that? What led to me not being that? Like, thinking of those things. And do I regret, like missing out? Like, or did I let it slip through my fingers kind of thing? Like, those things come up.
You kind of have this feeling, if I'm hearing of FOMO, a little like, did I miss out on something because I was too practical? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. And then that leads me to think that feeling or that missing an opportunity or not seeing or that this is an opportunity or being too afraid or whatever led to my being practical. Like, I don't want that for my kids or anybody else's kids kind of thing. And so that's, I kind of like, not to go so deep, but it feels kind of deep, but it's like, why wouldn't you want that for everybody though? And it just makes me think of like, okay, how could I have learned earlier to realize that there were so many risks I could have taken, and if it ended horribly, it wouldn't have been that horrible. It would have just been, oh, that I learned something there, or that didn't work. Oh, well. But like, I always have this, oh, if it doesn't work, then it's catastrophic. Right. And so like, that's where my head goes after like thinking about this stuff. And I don't necessarily have to go all the way down on that tangent right now or whatever, but.
Well, it's making me think a little bit, and I don't know that I can't remember who said this, but you might remember, but the quote of, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is it Michael Jordan or?
Probably. I don't know.
I will say that I do think it's interesting because I'm hearing from you, you kind of look back at wanting to be a rock star or a musician and all those things that the reason why you wanted to be that growing up, if you boil it down, not to profession, but you boil it down to what attracted you to that, connection, making sound, creating.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that even though you wouldn't label yourself as a musician, that you're not making in, pulling in tons and tons of money, making, playing music?
Right.
Do you still find that you incorporate that into your daily practice, into what you do in your spare time, into projects that you're doing?
Yeah, it's very clear to me, and that's why I can say it about when I was younger of what drew me to it. It's that to me is finding connecting with other people. And I know it's not like something special to me. Like we're all kind of looking for community and connection, and but it's just the way that I want to go about doing it. It just seems to be the most powerful way is maybe through music is when I was younger, like that. It just felt like it was like the only way I could see a path forward to doing that maybe. But now it's so clear to me, like doing this. I mean, this is it's audio. It's a form of audio, right? Like and I found a lot of community through music, going to concerts, being in crowds with people, or, at a musical, similar to listening to podcasts and feeling part of something, even though I'm not in the same space as them, and I think that's the same thing with like getting a new record and stuff too. It's like, and for books for that matter, because I was really into writing too. And that's, ultimately that's what I studied was music and writing, and it's communication, for the sake of making a connection, getting across ideas, communicating to somebody else, not just blah, this is what I have to say. It's like, this is what I have to say. Now I want feedback. And I hope that pun landed with some people too. It's a reciprocal thing. I think what became more clear as I got older and in the last several years through like the podcast platform and like kind of this resurgence of audio is like, and it's connections that we've had before, like through, like I said, through books and through music, like reading a book, finding like a favorite author or something that really resonates with you in the pages, right? Same with like a note or a guitar solo or a chord change that really just, you feel it. You not just hear it, but like you get goosebumps, right? Like we've talked about, like we've felt when we're thinking of an idea, like we feel a sensation because it's just ringing true with us, just like a change of chords or a modulation. And through this platform, I think you can find the same type of connection where it's like not specifically sharing the same space with somebody literally right now besides you, but we are. Like if you're listening to this, we're sharing a space. And I think it's similar to reading somebody's novel or somebody's nonfiction writing or an article or whatever. So it's just need to remind myself how powerful communication and connection can be, and just how important it is. And I maybe forget like, well, that's kind of the reason I like the things I like, is because it's a form of expression and not just for me to put out, but hopefully to get somebody sending something back. Ramble.
As I'm listening to you, what I think is interesting is I think sometimes people assume that my own path is consistent and that I've had a really clear idea about where I'm going, and I'm not going to stop until I get there.
Yeah. When you look back, everything looks like a straight line up and to the right kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? But it's like everybody's path is just winding and switchbacks and all these ups and downs. But it's like from a certain perspective, it just looks like it's a straightforward thing, right?
Right. But I will say, as I'm listening to you talk about your story, it doesn't feel like there's as many switchbacks. Okay. Like you're talking about.
Well, I don't want to depress people.
No, but you're talking about communication, connection, learning. And I will say, I think you and I, when we first started talking about Make, Create, Build, we talked a lot about the power of story and how everything that came prior to that point was your story, and it made you stronger and the work that you put out more rich.
Right.
And I think what's interesting is your story of wanting to be a musician growing up and the reasons why. has been woven into the fabric of your journey through college, through us getting married, having kids, until this point where we're creating this project together.
Yeah, it's all connected, right? But in the moment, it's sometimes like we can look back now and be like, oh, of course, this is where Keith ended up. And it was all worth it. Or
it's all part of the story.
So yeah. You helped me think of that and where we were talking earlier, like my default is that I'm working on changing, and it's the old way of thinking. It's the old Keith's way of thinking is, like I brought up earlier, what did I miss out on? You know, that FOMO. What did I miss? What was I not good enough to realize or pursue? It was a lot of waiting. I was waiting to be picked. That's how I grew up. That, you know, I'm sure we've mentioned that before, but you know, just it's really important that the finding the agency. I think that's kind of what you're talking about there, is realizing it's part of the story. It doesn't have to, you don't have to put a value of good or bad. It simply is, sometimes, is how I try to interpret it. And that's to kind of keep me, instead of stalling and thinking of what I lack or missed, how do I keep moving forward? And that's well, I'm on the path and let's keep moving forward. That happened, good or bad. What, you know, what's going to lead me forward?
Well, and I will say too, all of those experiences and who you are and how you show up, you are uniquely you.
Yeah.
There's not somebody else in the world that has the exact same story and experiences at the same point in time that you have.
Yeah. And yet there's a lot of people that had similar feelings that I had. Like there were times when it's like, why am I not doing that thing I say I want to do? If I really want to be a musician, if I really want to play guitar and have people hear me, who do I think's going to walk through the door and just magically find me noodling around in the 1 hour I do a week of it? You know, it is. And so it's like where, like, people feel stuck. And I think kind of part of where that comes from is forgetting that we need to make a choice, right? Like, and we need to choose to act and not wait. That's what it's bringing up for me. Yeah, I'm rambling.
So can I ask, the practicality piece is interesting to me, because that was something where I will say the travel agent piece, I thought it was a practical way for me to finance my itch for adventure.
Yeah.
Right? My love of traveling and seeing new things. But I didn't do that. Same thing with you. You said that you were interested in, you were going to be practical and possibly get a certificate in accounting.
Yeah.
Right? So you could work by day and then
party all night. Because that's how you get to be a well-known professional musician, is you just party all the time. You know, you don't put
in the work.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah,
I would work on the music. I wouldn't party all night.
I know. So thinking of that, I know that you ended up not choosing to go into accounting necessarily. What changed your mind?
My parents. They told me that I was too smart to simply go do accounting, or, you know, in not so many words, you know. I should go to college, experience, figure things out, you know. And I think it felt more of, you're too smart to not get a degree kind of thing.
You got good grades in high school?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I did well. I did, and that's
like, so, A's, B's? What are we talking?
Mostly A's.
Okay.
And some, you know, mostly A's, but like I got 1 C in reading.
That's interesting because you're such a deep reader.
Yeah.
Okay.
I obviously don't agree with that grade, but
still ready to plead your case.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Another time. Yeah. So, and that's, I mean, that juxtaposition, like, I was good at school and I was good at the system I was trained in. That's why I was good going to work and punching the clock. I was actually, something I heard Gary Vee talking about brought this up again. I listened to his podcast the other day, and he talks about entrepreneurship, and that's not quite my bag, but I'm more like, I lean more into like the freelance thing and kind of working for myself. Like I'm not out seeking to build businesses like a serial entrepreneur or whatever. But in the same way, he talks about entrepreneurship. You can take that towards like what I'm trying to do. And so he said it can kind of go one of two ways. Like you're born that way and you fight the system and you pursue it and you do it. Or the more sad part is you were born to do it and it's taught out of you. And I feel like I was born to be a connector and a communicator and creative. And the system kind of taught it out of me and turned me into somebody that wasn't an initiator. I wasn't an activator. I wasn't a leader. I was simply waiting for what I thought was supposed to happen. And so that struck me really hard on top of like, we were talking about this stuff. And then that hit me like a couple days later too. Wow. I forgot about it until now. And so that's why like when I bring up, like, I don't want our kids growing up like that. I want them to be leaders. And that doesn't mean a CEO. You can be a leader wherever you are.
Right. And lead from whatever position you're in.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so
that's interesting though, because I can see that. I like that. I'm glad you brought that up from Gary Vee, because that you're born to do it and you fight the system. I think we see a lot of entrepreneurs and people similar to Gary that do that and have done that. But then the second where you're born to do it, but it's taught out of you. And one thing that you said was that you were doing everything that the system taught you to do and then waiting to be picked. And what I heard in addition that I don't think you said, but is maybe understood without saying it, is waiting to be picked really meant you followed the rules that you were taught to follow. You followed them to a high standard and did really well. You got A's, mostly A's, except for that C in reading.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, there was a promise that was there that you would be, this was going to be the formula for you to be successful. And it sounds like that almost let you down because you didn't necessarily get picked and handed that success. And the entrepreneurial spirit that you have or had was kind of muted in you.
I think it more of a leadership spirit.
Okay.
Where like I was not the initiator, like we talked about before.
Sure.
That was taught out of me, I think. Because look at, you brought up child one. He wanted to be a snake catcher. Right. That's initiative. I'm going to go out and I'm going to catch this. I'm not going to wait for them to come to me. I'm going to go find them. That's what he was seeking adventure.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're born exploring and putting things in our mouths and touching things and grabbing. Right. And so anyway, it's more of, and I'm seeing it more and more clearly. And it's part of me is like, oh, it's so sad that it took me so long to realize, to lead, to choose action. But like, then you say, but it's part of your path. Like it's
part of your story.
Like, yeah. And so
yeah,
not dwelling on, oh, how many years did I waste not being this? Now it's like, what can I do for the next years, knowing what I know now with what I've learned on the journey, and turning it more into a gift, that, like, you know, taking that lesson that you bring up of, yeah, maybe it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, but I've learned a lot, right? Like it's all part of the experience, and yeah, keep moving forward. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think I often think about too, if you were given the opportunity to do what you're doing now, say 10 years ago, would you be in the place and have the experiences and the learning opportunities and the thoughts and the reading that you have to this point that would make you feel like you're showing up to create a product that you love?
Right. Or the resources at the right time and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that right there kind of helps even further just be like, okay, that get into like a growth mindset versus, you know, what didn't I have, or like a deficit or whatever. Kind
of a Eeyore mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's not like it's going to work anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that I don't know if that's my default, but it's definitely something that can protect me, right? If I that's a way to stop before you even start so that you can't fail, kind of thing. And I'm kind of over that. You know, I want to push past that, and I want to continue to push past those limiting first thoughts when something new presents itself. I want to lean more into like, oh, the possibilities, or I wonder how could that work. And I also think a healthy dose of that, how could it work, is, how do you put something through its paces to see if it does have a potential to be something better, but with a sense of possibility with that, and not a sense of like, how can I tear this down so I don't even start?
Being a travel agent, like I'm trying to think back, because your story to me, looking at it as you're talking through it, and it seems to make just so much sense.
Does it, like, but okay, all my story is so far to everyone is, I wanted to be a musician, I wasn't a musician, and now I have a podcast. So
sorry, I don't mean to laugh at you.
Yeah,
but
so I just realized that, like, way more of my story than anybody else. So I'm being cognizant of that. So what do you actually mean, I guess?
By that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think boiling it down into those things that matter and what drew you to that. So I'm trying to think. Sorry, I was on a
I didn't mean to interrupt. My path seems so clear now, or something, or what were you saying?
Yeah, I thought your path seemed clear in that you wanted to create and make connections. And I feel like you have created a path that got you to a project that is having you do that now.
Right.
I think is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And
looking at my path of wanting to be a travel agent, I still sit with that. And I wanted to connect. I wanted to learn. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have adventures. And I don't see it as clear for me.
That's interesting, because you love adventures. Like we were talking before, it's like, let's go on adventures, and let's not call them vacations, because we like the life we're building. And so let's be adventurous and let's go out.
Yeah, but it's moved more into my personal life than my working life, maybe. And so I'm trying to figure out, because I went from, and I'll do this really quick.
Yeah.
But I went from wanting to be a travel agent and deciding to instead go to college. And I went to college and I started thinking that I wanted to go into medicine. And so I came in as a chemistry major, as I mentioned.
Real quick, too.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that there's these parallels between our paths. Like, my family helped encourage me to go.
Sure.
And so did yours, right? Like, that's one of those things that, between you deciding that you wanted to be a travel agent and going to college, your family kind of stepped up and said, hey, maybe you should try college, right? And so I'm like, oh yeah.
And I will say, in high school, I wasn't as good a student as you were.
Just probably why you wanted to be an adventurer.
Right?
You weren't being indoctrinated.
No,
your free spirit.
I mean, I think I was a B student, but I got quite, several C's. Didn't have lots of A's. I liked school, but I liked adventures more.
So you were like pre-med, right?
Yep. So I came in to college as pre-med, and I actually ended up at college. I know my parents encouraged me to go, but as a teenager who really listens deeply to their parents and their advice sometimes, right?
Right.
So it actually took a letter from my grandma that, and I can't remember, I talked about this before.
I think so. Just real quick. Your grandma wrote you a letter.
Yeah. So my grandma wrote me a letter, and education has always been important. So she wrote a letter and said that I really should go, that I was smart, and that I should go close to home because I had family around to support me, which is true. And I feel very, very lucky that that's the case for me. And so I came in as pre-med. I thought that would be something that I could do. It would keep me away from many of the courses where I was required to read lots and lots, write lots and lots. I thought, okay, I can do biology and chemistry. I can get my hands into it. I can go and look at birds. But after about a year, I decided, you know what? I love music. So I changed it to music performance. Realized I didn't like blood or pus or anything like that bodies do. And your face right now is like, me either.
Didn't think I was going to hear you say that.
Well, it's the truth.
Yeah.
But I knew I liked working with people. And so I ended up discovering the world of student affairs, which I'm in. And so it seems like it is this journey that I've had that has made me, but it's a very eclectic journey, I think, of travel and different courses across a university to ending up somewhat specializing in just universities.
Right.
Right. I keep trying to think of that adventurer spirit that I had at that travel agent, wanting to be that and the connections and the learning. And I guess I do still see that in what I do day to day. Those threads still are there for me. Do you see them in me?
Oh yeah, I see it. I see it in you a lot, and that was my first thought when you started talking before you went and gave us your autobiography again.
Well, I want to know. I want to keep it real and let folks know where I'm at.
Yeah, I see the way that you talk about your work and the impact you're seeking to make in your role and with your team. I see that adventurer, that initiator, and I'm sure in the day-to-day you get bogged down in the slog of it and like kind of the bureaucracy, right? And
the slog and the bureaucracy is exhausting.
Yeah,
or can be. I know sometimes it's necessary, but it can be exhausting.
Yeah, it's necessary, and yet it can be better, right? And I think that's how you approach your work. Is this is how it is, but it can be better, and we're going to work to keep making it better. And so I think we just come into a time where it's a period of not feeling a lot of movement, possibly, and like the energy is a little lower because of things like that. And then it'll swing back up, and like the seasons will change, and it'll be more of like, look at all we're doing and all that slog, all that work that we pushed through. This is the result. It just ebbs and flows, right? I think I see it in the way that you talk and show up in your work. I see that, like that adventurer spirit in you still, and your willingness to go and do.
And what's interesting, I know when you were saying that you don't see that journey for you, but I see it so clearly. And I'm saying I don't necessarily see how it all connects for me, but you see it.
Yeah. And that is learning how to kind of step outside of yourself to gain perspective, I think is really a key part of, I don't even know what we're trying to talk about here right now. It's just mostly like, I think it really is gaining perspective so that you can see it from a different angle, because we're the only ones that have our vision right here. Everyone else sees us from outside. And there is a reason that you can see things differently or maybe more clearly than I can, is because you have a different vantage point. And there is a real skill in learning how to look at things from different angles and different perspectives. And what that really is, and what I've learned, is that's empathy. And learning how to put yourself not only in your shoes, but other people's shoes, to see how this or that, how is it going to sit with them? So if we bring it down to a product that we're trying to create, we need to be able to get out of our own perspective, and we need to look at how is this going to serve who we're seeking to serve. And that's empathy, and so you're doing it for me, I'm doing it for you. And I definitely need help being empathetic with myself sometimes and not being so hard on myself. And that's what I'm learning. There's been a change. It's like, and I shared a note of it. I kind of threw it out there because it's been in the back of my head in my notes. It's being stubbornly generous. And it came from probably you and I talking, and then me thinking of like, it was, I think you said like, you need to be as generous with yourself as you are with others.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
It's like, if you were treating me the way you're treating yourself, that wouldn't fly. Or if somebody else was treating me the way you're treating yourself, you would be up furious, And so I had this kind of this little stream of thought and I must have been walking or something, but I had to like type it down into my notes app, and I came across it the other day, and so I posted it up in like my little daily post. And it's one of those things that I'm still ruminating on it to figure out what it actually means or what I'm trying to say. But I think the starting point was like, I love showing up generously for other people. How would I try that for myself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
one thing I'd like to go back to, if you're okay with that, is the concept of regret.
Yeah.
There is a book that Daniel Pink just released. I think, is it called Regrets?
I'm not sure.
But it's a book all about the power of regret by Daniel Pink.
Yeah. I need to read it because you got it.
I saw him do a talk at a conference I was at, and it was all about how most people have regrets in their life, that it's really hard to go through life without having them. And thinking about, you mentioned, Keith, that you had some regret
Mm-hmm.
about not being a musician or a rock star. If you look back at it,
You don't have to keep saying
I love
rock star.
saying rock star. I don't know why. I like to,
It's so funny.
why is that funny?
Because like, what did somebody say? They're like, do you really want somebody to show up as a rock star, sleeping all day, partying all night, barely be able to get out of bed?
It's a commercial for Salesforce, isn't it?
It's something,
Or something like that.
It's something like that. But it makes me giggle, and I'm like, yeah, it's true. Like,
Yeah, it was a Super Bowl commercial.
Okay.
The ads are working on you.
well, they're not selling me anything. It's just a good concept.
Right. So regret. Looking back, do you have regret on that dream or that career sort of passion not panning out the way you wanted it to as a teenager?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes, but a little more nuanced is it's not that I'm not that thing I thought I was going to be. It's that I didn't start. I waited for a long time to start.
Okay.
That's kind of the regret, I think. Not 100% sure on how to communicate that, but yeah, there is a feeling. I mean, I'm trying to be kind and compassionate about that and not let that, like, I don't want that regret to eat me up, but there is a feeling of, oh, I wasted time. It's because I didn't have the skills to start. I was letting the resistance win, and because I didn't even know that's what was happening. I didn't know I was afraid to start. I didn't, it was happening, but I didn't have the perspective, I guess. I don't know. Like, it's interesting now to even try to fathom waiting for something that seems so important.
Yeah.
And life and circumstances and all those things are come into play too.
Yeah.
It was what it was, is kind of what I need to, and not, I don't need to beat myself up about it, but there's some, I don't know if regret is the right thing. Like you would say, like, that feels heavy, but honestly, so you brought that up, and the first thing I thought of is, we'll call Gary Vee out again. He's got the thing, regret is poison.
Mm.
And that was on my phone, that was like my lock screen.
Oh, really?
For several years when I was working in the cabinet shop.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It like he would do like a wallpaper Wednesday, so you screenshot it and then you can throw it up as your lock screen or your background. It was just a reminder of like, something of like, okay, I have this idea of make, create, build, whatever that might be. And there was just this idea, and it's like, okay, so how am I going to make that happen? And it wasn't the right timing, or I wasn't ready to lead or lean in or be an initiator about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was personally, but also where we were in our life and in our journey together and starting a family and all these things. So
yeah,
it's not to the regret or those things. It's like, I have the perspective now of like, okay, and don't beat yourself up about it. It was part of the journey, as you say. Right. So,
right.
So yeah. So you asked me that. You look concerned.
Regret.
You look a little concerned.
No, I'm not concerned.
Did I answer wrong?
No, there's not a right or wrong.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is that your response is very different if I was to think about answering the question for myself.
Mm.
And
so do you have regrets that you're
not a travel agent?
Yeah.
Do I want to travel more? Absolutely. Yes, of course. But I don't have regrets about not being a travel agent.
Yeah. Well, mostly because it doesn't exist anymore.
I know. I wouldn't have imagined. I mean, it does exist. It's just not in the same way it did back in like the 1990s, right?
The 20th century.
The 20th century.
The late 1900s.
Yeah, the late in the 1900s.
Oh, that hit so hard.
Right? No, but what's interesting is you were sharing, I was kind of thinking about, gosh, I don't feel the regret the way that Keith is feeling the regret. And it didn't, I mean, we often see things slightly different.
Keith feels hard.
Yeah. You can feel hard, can't you?
Yeah.
I can feel hard too. But I was kind of thinking about, how you were talking about, you see that adventure is infused in kind of how I show up and what I do. And I was kind of thinking of the idea that I see my path and my journey launching from being a travel agent to going through college to finding my career to finding creative outlets that are interesting to me and not quite knowing where I'm going. So what I'm thinking about is, have you been on Space Mountain at Disney World?
I
think it's at
don't
Disney World.
think I went on it because I don't do well on rides.
That's right.
Oh, Child 1 went on it.
Child 1 went on it. Yeah. So Space Mountain, just to explain kind of what it is to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you know.
Isn't it just a roller coaster?
So it's a roller coaster.
In the dark or something, though?
But it's darker.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
we actually went.
My equilibrium would just be shot and I would be sick for like hours.
It would not be great for you. But so basically, you're in like this big Space Mountain building. When I went with Child 1, we went on the Halloween night. I can't remember what it's called. And so they had all the lights off and they were playing like hard rock music.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't really see where you're going and when you're going up, when you're going down, when you're veering right, when you're veering left. And all the way along the way, you were just like rocking out and like, yeah, here we go. And it's like, oh, we're taking a left and oh, we're taking a right. But you end up at the end of the ride and you're like, whoo, that was something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm thinking about my path and my journey and how I went from wanting to be a travel agent to who I am, what I am, and what I show up for today, I almost kind of feel like that Space Mountain, that it's an adventure, it's exciting, but I can't always see where it is I'm going to be turning left, right, up, down, going in a loop-de-loop, but it's a fun journey all the same. So I guess now that I'm saying that, I can see how you reflected back to me that you do see that sense of adventure in me,
mm-hmm.
and that it's still alive and well.
Yeah. You've always been more of an initiator. And so to me, it's no wonder that your journey has been kind of a roller coaster.
Yeah. In a fun way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not in a terrifying way, not a white knuckle holding on to the lap bar sort of a way, but
yeah.
So the thing I was thinking about, and this is the last question I wanted to ask you about, if you think back being a teenager in the 1900s and wanting to be a musician and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself back then? So if you could hop in a teleport thing like on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and pop back to yourself, you know?
I said something about Bill and Ted's. I did a reference to it in one of my posts the other day too. That's so funny.
Done.
I didn't tell you either. I think that's so funny that we're kind of in sync, even though we don't we don't necessarily talk about everything, but we have
are we becoming one person where
probably
we just
starting to look more and more alike.
Oh no.
Our hair's about the same length, about the same color. No.
Oh goodness.
Okay, so
if
I could travel back
and give yourself advice,
I would say lean into what you want to do and find a way to say, yes, I'll learn that, or yes, I'll try that, even if I'm afraid, or even if it feels like I'm not good enough. Start something and don't worry about whether or not it's going to succeed. So I think that's where the real growth comes from, is repetitions. You can see the parallel between I did really well in school and yet have a really hard time initiating. You kind of point out that you weren't as successful of a student.
I wasn't a very strong student.
But look at all that you've done and look at all that you've initiated and started, not just for yourself, but for me. Mm-hmm. You're a big part of the reason I went and learned how to build guitars. You're the main reason I have the life I have right now with you and the kids. You're the main reason we're doing the podcast.
I think you have a lot to do with it.
I know, but you're a big deal.
Oh, I appreciate that. No pressure.
Okay. So obviously, then we got here. What do you think? What would you tell younger Laura?
Gosh, I think what I would tell her is that I know you want to go on adventures, but life is an adventure.
Okay.
I feel like Ferris Bueller right now, and I don't know the quote. Do you know which one I'm talking about? If you sit around for a minute.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and take a look around,
you might just miss it. So it's sounding a little like that, but I think saying that you can find adventure in what you do without having to always be on a plane and traveling to different destinations, and that you can always make time and space for that in your life when it makes sense and if you so choose. So I guess my advice would be to buckle up and enjoy the ride.
I like it. Cool. Should we leave it there?
I think so.
Okay. Do we want to wrap up with any recommendations of anything we've listened to, read, or watched?
Sure.
Do you have one?
Yeah, I do. So I would recommend, so something I've been listening to this week is Gary V. He does a number of different podcasts, and I'll tell you which one I thought was really interesting. So the one that I've been listening to, I listened to 2 episodes. One was on 3 tips on how to communicate better in the workplace, and the other was discussing radical candor versus kind candor. And I really enjoyed the difference between radical candor and kind candor, and how interesting it can be to think about. It's important to be direct and upfront, and you can do that in a way that's kind. And by not doing that isn't kind. Radical candor, Kim Scott's book, that's what that's based on. Really great book, but sometimes people misinterpret the radical piece of it to be blunt, honest, and give people an excuse to take the empathy out of their communication. And so that's why Gary talks about kind candor. And so I really appreciate that thought and that perspective. And so I've been engaging with his podcast around communication this week. How about you?
Yeah. I'm going to recommend something a little different, and it's because I need to make sure I'm putting time and effort into it, which is movement. Getting outside, getting a walk in, working on a little simple stretching and my mobility. It does wonders for me, and I know it does. And so I need to make sure I do it and create part of my practice around it, because it really helps me. It propels me forward to get a little movement in early in the day, because if I wait, it doesn't usually happen. Yeah.
No, I love that, because movement and being outside is so restorative. And not to jump onto your
go ahead.
recommendation, but this past week I had a really busy week. We had candidates coming to campus, ribbon cuttings, lots of I don't know if it's high stress, but large presentations to the whole campus community, to really important campus stakeholders, kicking off planning processes. So a lot. But yesterday I took the time to go up to walk in the woods with my parents. So we have some land up north in northern Wisconsin. My parents do. And even being able to walk with the beautiful red, yellow leaves, seeing swans land on the lake as we're walking along this path by this small little lake that's on the old farm where my family, grew up. It just was good for my soul. And that movement and the fresh air just is a game changer from a stress management and, again, connection standpoint. So sorry, I didn't mean to take that over.
Oh, it's good.
I just wanted to do a little shout out and say 100% agree.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up. See you next time.
Bye.